Hi, my name's Kate. I am a high school math teacher in the summer before my 20th year of teaching. Today, I thought that I would share with you guys some of the changes that I am planning on making going into the next school year. One of the things that I am going to make sure that I do next year with my syllabus is I did this second semester, but I need to tweak it a little bit, have a way for students either to sign and maybe even have parents sign the syllabus, or have a more comprehensive like Google form quiz over the syllabus, more specifically stating each of the different things that they understand this policy, and that they just understand the policies with the course, rather than this year's second semester, this past year second semester is just more of a blanket, yep, I read the syllabus and I don't have questions, or I read the syllabus and I have questions and I'm going to come in whatever date to ask those questions. So it's going to be very specific for each of the big policies, stating that they understand it, or again, I will be having them sign it, maybe having their parents sign that syllabus, because that was kind of where some of my biggest issues came last year, was around those policies. Another change that I'm going to make next year is around my test reviews. I did this occasionally, actually I did this a lot more 2 years ago, and I did it only a few times this year, and that was playing more review games than just, here's the review, and I did a lot of this year, I want you guys to work on it by yourself for 30 minutes, then work with your team for 30 minutes, and then we'll go over the answers and questions. And on my end, that's just really easy, right? I have an hour of kids really working without having to answer questions. But I don't think that it was the most effective way to review, and I didn't like it. So I am going to go back to playing more games when I do reviews for tests and their final exam. And so some of those review games that I love playing Capture the Flag, where teams have to work in groups to solve the problems one at a time. So I do have a video. I'll try to remember to link it wherever the cards are up here in the cards, so that if you guys are interested in more in figuring out what Capture the Flag is, you can watch that video. I've got a couple other games that are similar to that, like Hit the Target. So instead of capturing flags, they're just trying to get to a mystery target number. I am going to buy 8 sets of just like cheap Jenga blocks, and so I want to use Jenga to incorporate review. And so different questions are different colors of the Jenga blocks, so when the kids pull like a green Jenga block, or if they want to, they have to answer a green question first, and those sorts of things. I haven't actually done that one yet. So my goal though this year, and one thing that I'm changing, is how I review for those games, and I'm really excited to incorporate more games to review rather than just the typical sit, work on a boring worksheet. 2 other changes that I'm making kind of revolve around my tests themselves. So this past school year, I changed my test makeup policy, which worked for the most part. And it was if they were absent for the test on Monday, say they were in class on Wednesday, they were going to make up the test in class on Wednesday. And that worked pretty well for the most part, except I had those frequent students who were absent all the time and were absent. The test was on Monday, and then 2 weeks later, they still hadn't been to class. They, maybe came to their other block days. They just were late to school a lot and whatever. So one of the things that I am going to add to this, and the other pre-calculus teacher is doing the same because she had issues as well. We are going to add you have 4 school days after the test that you have to get that made up. So if you've been absent, you need to make sure that you contact us so that you can get that caught up. If you know you're going to be gone for a long time, talk to us ahead of time and we can make arrangements and figure things out. But just in general, we're going to give students 4 days after that test to make it up. It is still going to be, at least for me, the next time you're in class, you need to make it up, or once we get to that 4th day, you just need to come in and make sure that you make that up. So that's one change that I'm making around my tests. The other change that I'm making around the tests is when they're done with the test, I am going to have an assignment for my students to work on that practices the prerequisite skills that they need going into that next chapter or that next unit. And I find that that's going to be really helpful, so that I'm not spending those first few days with warm-ups really reviewing how to do all of those things, and it's just going to be built in. So maybe the first problem will be an example of, here, I've worked it out, just so that you can see it so you can remember how to do it. It's not going to be anything complicated. And again, it's not anything new. It's just review stuff that they need to be more comfortable with and remember how to do going into what we're working on. So for example, with quantitative reasoning, we do a lot with fractions. And so maybe it's just a review, here's a quick review of simplifying fractions, adding fractions, or finding common denominators of fractions, right? Just some really basic things. Or when we're getting into our proportion stuff, here's just a couple of, one-step, two-step equations to solve, and I want you guys to work through those. So nothing super complicated, super in-depth, but just when they're done with the test, here's a short assignment that you're going to work on. Now, the students that maybe take the entire class period for the test, that will become homework. But again, it's not going to be like 60 problems, 20 problems. It's probably going to be at most 10 problems for the students to work on. So it's really going to be a low-level thing, but at least it'll give those students who are done with the test early something to do. Okay, saving the biggest one for last. Indiana has changed their cell phone policy for this coming school year, where phones are not allowed to be out from bell to bell. Now, we're not talking bell starting class to bell ending class. We're talking bell starting school to bell ending school. So kids cannot have their phones. And actually, I should change this and say it's not just phones. It's all personal electronic devices. So it's no phones, it's no smartwatches, it's no meta glasses, it's no earbuds, it's nothing. They can't have anything. And so this is going to change things for me. So for the last at least 10 years, I have had my students turn in their homework digitally. They used, at my former school, their iPads, and then when I moved here, they were using their phones, and they scanned their homework into a PDF, either using the Notes app on an Apple device or on an app called Cam Scanner, and they would scan their homework, they would turn it in on Canvas as a PDF, and I never collected papers, and it was fantastic. I absolutely loved not collecting papers. It has been so nice. However, now with this new law in place where students are not allowed to have their phones out for any reason, not even for educational purposes. Okay, there are some, 504 or IEP issues. That's not what this is. So I can't have students do this. Now, yes, I could say, well, I want you to make sure you do it before you come to class, but the reality is that's not going to happen. So I am going to start taking homework paper copies again, and I'm not thrilled about that. I did try last year at the start of the year, before I had them use their phones, I tried going around to each student and just kind of like spot checking real quick. First of all, it took forever for me to do, and I know if I did it more, I would get faster at it, but I felt like I wasn't able to look over their homework as well as I wanted to. Even though I only give homework a completion grade, I still want to look at it, and that just didn't give me enough time to really check the homework and see how they were doing on it. So I am going to have them turn in their homework on paper and pencil. Unless we do a digital activity, then obviously that'll be turned in digitally. So that is going to be the biggest change that I am making this year, is just the way that students turn in homework. So I have to figure out a few other things, because normally I had the students, I gave them the first few minutes to turn in homework digitally, and then I posted the answers up so that the students can grade those. A lot of times I do post answers in Canvas, but there are times when I don't want to do that. Like if we're working with exponents and pre-calculus, right? There's really no work to show with certain things. If we're working with factoring, there's no work to be shown. So I still have to navigate how I'm going to go about grading homework, because I don't want to do the whole, like, we're going to grade it and then you're going to turn it in and all of that. I'm not going to do that. So I would love to know in the comments below, if you collect homework, but you don't grade every question, how do you deal with the grading aspect? Because I do think it is important for students to know how they're doing on their homework. So still trying to figure that out. The other big change that I'm making that involves homework, and I am doing this really to be in line with the other pre-calculus teacher. I am no longer going to accept late work in pre-calculus. So last year, actually, for years, 10 years or so, I accepted late work until the day of the test. They got partial credit for it. But to be more in line with all of the other pre-calculus teachers so that we're consistent with our grading, we're consistent, with our expectations. And as this is a dual credit class, they're getting college credit for this. I am no longer going to accept late work. And so this is going to be, a challenge for some kids, and I do acknowledge that, but hopefully, you know, I'm going to be trying to we try to give them time in class to work and at least start on the homework. And homework usually is not 30 or 40 problems. I think every once in a while, and this is, you know, when we're doing like exponents, there may be 20 problems with exponents, right? But once we get into the harder things, I'd say 15 questions or less is typically what students were given for homework. And so, you know, that's going to be something we're going to have to navigate. Now, the hard thing is that with them turning in homework paper and pencil, I'm going to have to keep track a little bit better of, you know, homework 3.2 was due on Monday, but Susan was absent Monday, so homework 3.2 is due for Susan on Wednesday. Or no, she can pick it up on Wednesday and then it is due on Friday for Susan. And so some of this is going to become a little bit more complicated. So I'm just going to have to figure out really how can I just make sure I know who is absent, because let's face it, absences have become a huge issue. And it's not just 1 or 2 kids absent, it's 7, 8, 10 kids absent a class period. Sometimes they're absent for a week at a time. And so really being able to manage the absences is going to be important for me. So I've got to figure out how I'm going to do all of that with all of the no late work, but allowing for absences. So any suggestions, any ideas, any whatever you guys have about this, please leave those in the comments below, as well as I try to kind of navigate how all of this is going to work. And that's really the no late work is a big reason why after their tests, I am going to have an assignment for them to do, because in the past it was always when you're done with your test, you need to work on your missing assignments. And, you know, kids had missing assignments, they worked on them, kids that didn't just did whatever. But now that I'm going to have no students with anything that they are allowed to turn in or able to turn in, that's why I need those additional things to work on. And I know it's going to be really helpful as we go into that next chapter again, so I'm not having to spend all of that time reviewing those things. So those are my biggest changes right now that I am making for next year. I would love to know, are there changes that you are implementing next year to help things either run smoother, or because there was a change to a policy, whether it was to your school, whether it was to your state, whether it was just to your grade level? I would love to know what those changes are in the comments below. If you guys found this video helpful, if you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. If you are interested in following along more with my journey as I start year 20 and as I do all things mathy, please subscribe. I do upload videos every Friday, but you can hit that notification bell to be notified the next time a video goes live. I hope you have a mathy day.